Welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast, where we will discuss how to defer taxes on the sale of your property, earning passive real estate income, and everything you need to know to go from active investor to passive investor. Join us as we interview passive investment sponsors, explore the journey of other retiring real estate investors, and share our due diligence process we perform to select passive investments. Investment advisory services provided by Insight Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is only intended for clients and interested investors residing in the states in which we are registered to provide investment advisory services or exempt from registration. Please contact us to determine if the firm provides investment advisory services in the state where you reside. All content on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Material presented is believed to be reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to another party's informational accuracy or completeness. Insight Investment Advisors, LLC and its representatives do not provide tax or legal advice, and nothing herein should be construed as such. Always consult with your tax advisor or attorney regarding your specific circumstances. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Bruckman. I'm excited to be joined by Cheri Hipenbecker, who told me how to pronounce that correctly. Thank you. Keep the Hipenbecker in there properly. Thank you, Cheri.
You can call me Mrs. Hippie, by the way.
Oh.
I own a 1984 VW Peace Van bus with my spouse and children, and we are going camping this evening in the VW bus. And the vanity plate is Hip E Van for Hipenbecker van. So if you ever see an ugly, I mean, it's so unatrociously ugly, brown on brown on brown, with a hippie van. That's me. Say hi.
That's your new name now.
Yeah.
It's happened. It's probably so ugly that it's cool. Like retro is so cool, and it has all those vibes to it now, right?
It has just a little bit of rust on it.
Oh, perfect. Good. Not. We won't accuse you of being a hipster then at all, right? That's your verified proof. So I'm so excited to join us. Cheri and I have had so much fun co-presenting in the past at various different apartment associations across the state of Wisconsin. And Cheri and Knightberry Title are very focused, and your presentation is very focused on explaining 1031 exchange simply to some of the folks in the room. And it's such an entertaining presentation. I wanted you to come on. And as our first QI to kind of come on the show, is so much of we've talked about on the investing side, we've neglected to go over the basics of 1031 exchange. So I'm excited to do that today.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm general counsel with Knightberry Title. Knightberry Title is a title and settlement company originating out of Racine County, Wisconsin, expanded through the entire state of Wisconsin. We service all 72 counties. We have offices in Minnesota, Florida, Upper Michigan, the UP of Michigan, and one office in Texas. And yes, as you indicated, we have a qualified intermediary team. We call it Knightberry Title Exchange. And we can serve 1031 straight transactions, forward transactions. We don't handle reverse exchanges or maybe build to suit exchanges, but we have a connection that can help you out in those a little bit more nuanced. But yes, we like to, because we're in the title settlement world, we thought it was a good source because people want to do, hey, I'm selling this rental property, I'm selling this investment property, I'm going to be reinvesting in something else very quickly. Can I park my money someplace? You can with the qualified intermediary and defer capital gain. And thus why we're here today.
Yeah, it's a huge thing when we tell folks to like, well, what do I do first? Like I want to do a 1031 exchange. It's the first thing I do. And the first piece of advice we always give folks is ask your title company if they provide the service. It's the most seamless way to go about this. No reason you couldn't use a third party with your title company, but another leg, another party, more paperwork to do, more connections to make. This is so much more seamless and easy. You find that as well, hence the need to have this business.
That's exactly right. And we're there to park those funds. So a couple things that, I'm going to have you, Brandon, sometimes I take over. So you tell me how you want to have this role for your groups of people that listen to your podcast or watch your podcast.
Yeah, that's maybe start with the basics. So why am I doing a 1031 exchange? What the heck are we talking about?
All right.
I heard I can defer some tax. Is that right, Cheri? Is that true?
It is a way to defer capital gains tax. So Brandon, do you own any real property?
I own lots of real property. Tons.
Okay.
All of this in my background if you're watching.
Yeah, you own the entire downtown Milwaukee. Good for
I own
you.
all of that building. I'll just point at some of the buildings that I own, all this stuff, but I want to sell it, Cheri. I'm sick of it.
Okay. So the first property that you ever purchased, probably a duplex.
Yeah.
I would imagine. Duplex in, let's say, I don't know, West Dallas or something.
That sounds like me. Yep.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that start out with investing in duplexes because you're going to live in one side, you're going to rent out the other, and then eventually you say, I'm going to rent out both sides and I'll go live someplace else. And then it's 10 years down the road and you want to sell that duplex because you don't want to manage that anymore. And you want to jump into, let's say, an 8-family, or you want to do in some assisted living. You want to transition out of that type of real estate investment to a different type of real estate investment. And you say, well, I bought it. Let's say you bought it for, I don't know, 10 years ago, $100,000. Sound about right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking. Yep, that's exactly correct. Gosh, you're good.
So you have $100,000 that you invested. You depreciated down that asset. Quick depreciation, somewhere around $40,000. It's been depreciated down. So you have $60,000 of basis. You're going to sell it for, let's say, $250. If you're selling it for $250, now you have a ton of capital gain. You have some depreciation recapture that you have to pay back, and you're saying, why do I have to pay tax now if I'm just going to go reinvest in real property in the United States? Is there a way I can push what I have here, create that bundle, and put it into that new piece of real property when you're buying your 8-family or something like that, because you're changing your investment strategy? The answer is yes, and that's what a 1031 exchange is. There are a lot of components to the 1031 exchange, but the key that you need to know when you sell that property in West Dallas is that you cannot take possession of that money at all. If you take possession of the sales proceeds, you have blown your exchange, and the IRS says you can't do it. You have to work with your title company or whoever your qualified intermediary is going to be at for the time of the closing, and they will take the fund, they will prepare the necessary paperwork and take the funds and hold it for you until you're ready to buy that new property. And you have to purchase that new property. Typically, it's 180 days from when you sell your first property, or shorter if you have your tax return that's going to be filed with the IRS in between there. So you want to extend it out to 180 days as your max time to reinvest in something else by extending out your tax return and doing a file and extension there. So what are you doing? You're saying, I'm selling property now. I will buy new property within 180 days. And then when I sell that new property you sell it in 10 years from now, you'll pay the capital gains then, but you're just not paying it today, and depreciation then. You're just not paying it today. Mm-hmm. So key thing is you got to work with your qualified intermediary before you sell that property, because if you don't and you take possession of that money, you're out. You can't do your qualified exchange.
And I've gotten those phone calls and they're not fun. What's a qualified intermediary? So I'm going to break apart some of the things you said here. What's a qualified intermediary for our listeners? What's
it's a third party, not related, that holds the fund for you, signs appropriate documents, and follows the rules of the IRS. A couple things about a qualified intermediary: there's no licensing for qualified intermediaries. There's no vetting that's done by the federal government. You got to vet on your own. If you are going to be somebody who's investing in this, that you know who the qualified intermediary is, that you trust them, that they're going to keep the money in a safe, secure escrow account and not use the funds for their own purpose. Because there have been bad qualified intermediaries nationwide. I have a great story from American Greed of a dude that stole over $100 million and decided to spend some time in jail and ended up dying in jail because he took money from people that sold real property, used it for his own investment, and then used a Ponzi scheme. So every time new money came in from a new real property, he used it to help out. Eventually, the Ponzi scheme, everything collapsed down and he goes to jail. Over $100 million. And why is that? Because as an investor in real property, it is assumed that you have some due diligence. You're not a typical consumer out there that the government needs to be able to protect with licensing. They say, nope, you can do your own vetting. So you want to make sure that you vet that qualified intermediary appropriately, make sure they have some insurances, make sure that they're going to keep the money in an escrow account that's going to be safe and secure and not utilized for their own purposes.
Could I think about this as a clean checklist? 1, escrow account, segregated account that's my own, has my name on it. 2, insurance. And then 3, am I looking at maybe some reputational checks on that or reference checks on that? Is that a good 3-part checklist for me to kind of go through?
That's a great starting point. At one point on the escrow account with your own name, the escrow account will be named in, for example, Nightberry Title Exchange. We have the escrow account in our name, but we ledger every money that comes in a separate ledger. So we're not going to open up the QI isn't going to open up a bank account for you, Brandon, a bank account for me, Cheri. they're going to have one bank account, but separate ledgers within that bank account.
I see. So it
And that's
isn't
appropriate.
truly, here comes my geeky finance terms again. It isn't going to be truly segregated, but it is accounted for properly. And that's what you're looking for, is a separation of that. It can't be in Nightberry's general checking account or general ledger or business account. It's separate for exchanges. It's a separate escrow place, but
That's
it is
right.
commingled with other exchangers.
It is commingled with other exchangers, and that's typical in our industry, but it is identified as an escrow account. And that's the key, is identified as escrow. In other words, it's not our operating funds. It's money that we're holding on behalf of somebody else and using as directed. So those are the first steps. Know who you're going to deposit your money with. And then number two, if you're comfortable depositing your money with it, then there are documents that need to be signed before you sell that real property, that first exchange. And that QI, the qualified intermediary, has to be involved in that first sale. Because sometimes the title company will be involved when you purchase the property, not the sale of the property. However it goes, you want to make certain that you have the exchanger, the qualified intermediary, involved in the sale and the purchase, so that the appropriate documentation is made.
What am I looking for in that closing statement that lets me know that that has happened, that this is a 1031 exchange?
Yeah, there's the qualified intermediary is actually going to sign on behalf, indicating that the funds are going to come over to the qualified intermediary to be held. Because again, your key, Brandon, is when you sell that property, you cannot touch those sales proceeds. If you touch it, your exchange is blown. So you want to have us involved in signing that closing statement, having the necessary paperwork at the time of the sale.
Got it.
So you've done that. You've vetted your QI. You've made sure your QI is signing the closing statement involved on the sale transaction, that the funds are deposited with the QI in the escrow account that's separately ledgered for you. And now you're ready to go and buy your new property. I said something about 180 days, right?
You did. I caught that.
But I didn't say one of the more important things as well. The next step, when you sell your real property, you have 45 days after the sale to identify the new property that you're going to invest into. And then you have 180 days total to purchase that property. So when you go into a 1031, you probably want to have your ducks in a row as to, I'm selling this, and here's kind of where I'm going to reinvest. You have 45 days to identify to the qualified intermediary what property you're going to reinvest into. Do you have to tell us one property? Nope. Two properties? No. Typically, you can identify up to three properties that you're interested in. Hopefully you have them under contract, because, in this type of market, it is difficult to be able to get things under contract. So you hopefully have them under contract, but you have up to 45 days to identify up to three properties. There's some small variations on that, but for the most part, three properties is what you can identify.
All right, cool. I'm staring behind me. I like, maybe three of those properties on this street, whatever this street is. Maybe I'll do that. Can I just write that on the form? Maybe three properties.
Yeah, you want to identify
an address?
Like addresses are important.
Oh,
it has to be in writing. It has to be delivered to us. Email is fine. You can change your mind. Let's say day 40, you say these are property 1, 2, 3 you want. And then day 42, you realize I can't get property 1, but I can get property 4. You can change your mind as many times as you want to change those three properties you've identified up until the 45th day. On that 45th day, that's it. That's all you get. And you're going to say, but doesn't the IRS have a heart? Won't they let me change it? Day 46, I can't get. No, the IRS doesn't have a heart. The IRS says, I am going to count calendar days. Do Saturdays and Sundays count? Yes. Is it business days? No, it's calendar days. Look at a calendar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Get up to 45. That's what you have to identify your three properties. And again, you can modify that as many times as you want within that time frame.
Yeah, it's critical. Like you said, you have to have your ducks in a row. It's critical that you're thinking about what the replacement is and the sale of your property. It's not fun to work these tracks at the same time. It is time consuming, but you almost have to make sure that you're doing this right. Do you see much of the 200% rule or 95% rule crossing the desk at all?
We don't. So what Brandon is saying is that I said you can identify up to three properties within that 45 days. There are two other smaller rules that the IRS has in place. It's called a 95% rule or a 200% rule. It really depends on the values of the property that's being bought and sold. We don't see that often. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it at our company. So if you have something where you say, I really want to identify like 6 properties because I'm selling a property worth $2 million and these properties I'm investing in are like $200,000 each, can I do that? The answer is you can. But in that instance, please work with your accountant as well to make sure your accountant's on board. Oh, I probably should have said this from the very beginning. Brandon, should somebody who's doing an exchange talk to their accountant talk to their tax advisor, talk to their attorney?
Yeah, it's the first stop to make. I'll cheat here and step out of my role for a second. I'm breaking the fourth wall. Yes, it's the first thing that someone should do, because you do want to understand your tax liability. I have, and this is rare, but I've had a handful of clients that have not done that and started this process at 1031, circled back to their CPA and went, oh, actually, I don't have a tax bill because I have these other losses over here from this thing and the operating carry forwards, whatever it may be. Or they've reduced their tax liability to a point where they said, this isn't really worth me going through the exchange. I'd rather have the freedom of the capital, pay the little tax that I have. It's not as bad as most of the scenarios we see are pretty horrific in terms of the tax bill that would need to be paid. So most of the time it makes sense to do this from a tax efficiency perspective. But sometimes not all the time. And so, yeah, it's really important to make sure you understand what that tax liability bill is as a first step, and then make a plan accordingly about your comfort level of paying that or not paying that today.
Perfect. So on that point, I just want one other point. Let's say somebody says, I don't need to talk to my accountant today. I'll just sell my property, deposit my money with the QI, and then I can decide after that closing if I want to be able, if the exchange makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. That's certainly an option that somebody could do. Just know that the money is locked up, that you won't have access to that money, because that money that's deposited with the qualified intermediary is locked up for at least 45 days. The qualified intermediary cannot release the funds to you until the earlier of, number one, 45 days passes and you haven't identified any real property to exchange into, or number two, you filed your tax return with the IRS or 180 days. So know that once the money is deposited with the QI, it's not your money. It actually has to be held by the QI pursuant to the IRS regulations.
Yeah, I will say that when folks aren't consulting their CPA, or there's just not enough time for them to kind of go through that activity, I'll tell them, hey, let's take a 45-day option in essence.
Yes.
To defer that. And yeah, we hit day 46. You don't put anything on the ID form. That's critical, correct? Because if I do identify properties, you have to hold that for 180 days, right?
Well, you could identify and then you could withdraw the identification timely. And then I could say, oh, no proper identification was made. And then day 46, I can release the funds to you.
Got you.
Or you make no identification. But just know that at least 45 days it's locked up. Why? Because I have to follow the IRS regs. Would I love to violate the IRS regs? Sure. Do I want to go to white collar crime jail? No, I don't. So not today.
Nope. I wear black, not orange.
Oh, we're both wearing black.
Yeah, exactly. Not orange. Not orange. Black is the new black. Orange is not good for us, to say the least. We don't play that game. But if I do, just for clarity, if I do send an ID form in and we're past the 45th day and I haven't withdrawn that form, do you have to hold that for 180 days? Or can you withdraw that form at day 47 or 48?
I can't. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So it's an important thing for folks to know. It is a 40, in essence, a 44-day option. So you're going to make a decision at day 44. Or, I mean, there's no reason. I don't really want you to hold my cash for 180 days, but if that's my choice, still, it gave you the optionality to potentially defer a big tax bill. I can live with that. But
that seems reasonable.
I can live with that. I don't like it, but I can live with it. Okay, so we did IDs, we did timelines. What are some of the other things that come up? I know that there's a couple that hit my desk. The reinvestment requirement and the need to recreate debt always is confusing for folks. Can you kind of give them some clarity?
I'm going to have you kind of jump into that one because I'm not following exactly the train of thought that
I'll take them in pieces. So, all right. So in the example you gave me, my duplex in West Allis, 100K, I sold for 250. I have a gain here of roughly 150K. I have to invest that, right?
You should. Yes. Take full advantage. Mm-hmm. What you want to do is whatever you sold, you want to buy at least that dollar amount to take full advantage of it. That isn't to say that you couldn't buy something for $200,000 and then have boot that for that $50,000. And that's terminology. I'm an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm going to defer to the accountants on that. They love to say the word boot, right, Brandon? I'm your finance guy. Boot, 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 boot. If you are not reinvesting at least what you sold for, then you're not taking full advantage of the deferral that you're going to have in place. And maybe there might be a case. Let's say you do have a $2 million building and you're in Milwaukee and you want to invest in an area that's not as expensive as Milwaukee. Maybe I don't know what that area would be. And you're investing in something that's bigger, better builder, but it's only $1.5 million. Yeah, still reinvest, but talk to your accountant regarding your tax liabilities on that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty important because this becomes, I think there's two aspects of this. Is I think Nightberry and Cheri, the work you guys are doing is about here's the rules and here's how you execute. Whereas myself and our business and working with a client CPA, we're thinking strategically about how you want to approach it, right? And the application of it. So that's absolutely right. Is the best way to take advantage of this, to completely defer the tax, is you have to trade up in essence in property value. You have to replace the debt if there's debt there, or bring cash to the exchange. But it's all of it, right? It's not going to be just the gains that I have. I have to reinvest everything in order to get that full advantage. However, I may not want to do that. Why? Because I may need some liquidity now, right? Especially in some of the passive options that we're talking about, there isn't liquidity in those, right? So it's a decision that strategically you have to make now. And there is no reason why you can't do a partial exchange. There's nothing against that, right? You probably see partial exchanges. Maybe, what would you say on a percentage basis? Does that happen often?
No, maybe 10% of the time or something like that.
Gotcha. But it is there.
But it's certainly their choice. I mean, there's nothing prohibitory about that. It's just that you're not taking full advantage of what some of the tax consequences are. Should we show people how this works, like with real dollars and cents, Brandon?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here.
This is why you watch the podcast on YouTube, because you missed this in audio. So watch and listen.
So this is my slide deck you're showing.
Darn it,
but
do
in
it.
my slide deck, I have a link over to what is not Nightberry's website. You know what? I'm just going to show Nightberry's website just for fun, just so you know who to contact us. We have a lot of different, this is our website. We have a lot of different locations. I'm going to scroll down here. We have our locations. You'll see we are throughout the state of Wisconsin. We're in Texas, Minnesota, Michigan, and Florida. So we're a lot of different places. But we thought that this IPX 1031, this isn't a company that's all they do are 1031 exchanges, a little bit more expensive than Nightberry. Not to say that they're not great. They're just going to be a little bit more nationally based.
And shout out to that team. We do know those folks over at IPX, and it is a good option for some of the national basis that we have, or if they're dealing with a title company that doesn't provide exchange services.
Yeah. And we actually can provide exchange services even if we're not involved in the sale or the purchase. We're happy to do that as well. But they have a phenomenal capital gain estimator calculator. We were thinking about recreating, and then we're like, this is a very good one. So let's talk about yours. Let's go through numbers. You purchased it for $100,000, right?
Yep.
All right. Your capital improvements, you didn't put anything in.
No
accumulated depreciation, we decided that you depreciated $40,000. That was just my rough numbers. You're going to sell it for $250,000. Selling expenses, I don't know, $10,000, something like that. Loan balance 0 because you paid this thing off. State capital gains rate in Wisconsin is 6%. And then there we go. It's going to tell you all of these numbers, and it's ridiculously cool. The gain from appreciation in value was $140,000. That's what you're subject to your capital gain because you sold it. Is that right? Did I do these numbers right? Yeah, I guess. Gain from depreciation allowed subject to depreciation recapture. That was it. Because it was 100,000 purchase, 250 sale. They X'd out the $100,000 selling expenses. That's why you got to the 140. I'm just going to show you 0 selling expenses so that your potential gain is $150,000 plus $40,000 depreciation recapture, which is, that's inexpensive, right, Brandon? Depreciation recapture. I took depreciation over the years, and now I have to pay back the government for the for my reduction in my income taxes. At what rate?
I believe 20%. 25%. Sorry, there it is. 25% depreciation.
5%. So you got to pay 25% on the $40,000 that you depreciated. You got to pay your capital gains based on wherever you are in your tax structure. That's based on IRS tables. And then, of course, you have state taxes in Wisconsin at 6%. So in the hypothetical here, if you're in the 15% capital gains tax bracket, your hypothetical taxes are $43,900. If you're in the 20% tax bracket, your hypothetical taxes, which is your capital gain, your depreciation recapture at 25%, your state taxes, and plus 3% NII tax. I forgot about that. That's that Medicaid tax that's in play if you're a high income individual. That isn't always going to apply to people, but you'll see it doesn't apply at 15%. If you're in the 20% tax bracket there for purposes of capital gains, you're probably going to pay that 3.8%. So you're talking $58,000. In that sale for $250,000, you're potentially looking at $58,620 of capital gains. It'd be much nicer to be able to take that bucket of $58,000 and reinvest it into that 8-family that you're doing it. If you do a 1031 exchange, if you do it correctly, your tax amount at the time of the sale of that $250,000 is zero.
And it's funny, as we've gone through this, of course, consult with your CPA. However, as we've gone through this in multiple real-time examples with our clients, in a vacuum, this is pretty accurate.
This is a good idea. It's a good starting point. Talk to your accountant, but it's a great starting point.
It's a great starting point, and it lets you kind of understand, hey, guess what? This is too much money. I don't want to pay that today. I don't want to do that. Let's defer that and reinvest. And it's funny because strategically, we also have the conversation about, in particular here, we'll have the conversation about, hey, or you don't want to do the exchange. Well, what are you going to do with the money? Like, well, I'm going to go buy this, reinvest. Like, you're going to invest it anyways. Why wouldn't you just defer it? I realized that we got to do some work here to make this happen. And we got great people like me and Cheri to get you through it. Why wouldn't you do that? Right. So there's a little bit of a mindset, I think, that we have to jump over slightly to get folks to kind of get moving on this. But the numbers are indisputable. Economically, you want to do this.
And a couple of things on this. Can I reinvest into, let's say I want to sell, I'm out of the real estate market, I'm selling that 2-family and I want to jump into the stock market. Can I reinvest into stock, Brandon?
Oh, no, negative. You cannot.
You have to reinvest into real property in the United States. Nope, you can't go to Tulum, Mexico. It has to be within the United States. The whole concept about 1031 is that we are building equity in the United States, reinvesting, improving our government, improving our tax base, improving our country as a whole. So it has to be a reinvestment in real property in the United States. Can it be a vacation home? Potentially for you. You got to talk to your tax accountant. There is some good regulations coming from the IRS that tell you what the rules regarding vacation home reinvestment, where you can partially have it as a vacation home, partially have it as a VRBO, and then it might be able to qualify. So talk to your accountant as that as well. To Brandon's point,
yep.
If you're in a time crunch and you're selling your property, you're not certain if you're going to reinvest in another real property, go ahead and get the exchange started. Because if you take possession of that property of that money on that sale, you've blown your exchange. At least park the money for 45 days with a QI to preserve your opportunity to be able to do a 1031 exchange.
100%. 100%. Help me with, what's the next topic that I wanted to cover with you? Help me a little bit on thinking about debt a little bit on here. So let's imagine that I pay off a mortgage associated with that property in West Dallas. How do I need to approach that? I need to get some more debt on this property, don't I?
Oh, so that you're not showing enough income. But I think that's for another call, because we have 2 minutes and 10 seconds left, Brandon.
No, I'm fixing that right now.
Oh, well, then
I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna fix that right now. You're not gonna get off the hook that easy.
Okay, so your question.
Yep.
You're not selling your real property. Is that what you're saying?
No, I am. I have to pay. I have some debt on that property.
So, I mean, you bought it for $100,000. Let's say you took out an $80,000 loan, and $80,000 is still outstanding because you never paid any principal down on it.
Correct.
So at the sale of that property, you are paying $80,000. So what's going into the QI is $150,000 or something like that.
Correct.
Okay. And now you have $150,000 cash to buy something else. And then the question you have is, do I need to put debt into that new property that you're acquiring? Sure.
Correct.
How else could you do it? How else do you buy?
So, I mean, I guess theoretically you could bring cash to the exchange, but yes. I don't know if I want to do that. So I got to go get some more debt, huh?
Okay. Yes. Again, I'm still not following 100% what you're trying to thought.
I think people get, here's a question I get all the time. So I'll frame it a little bit. So I get a lot of people ignoring the fact that they have debt on that property. And they think about it as just another thing that they paid off in association with their sale. And they're not thinking about the total property value at all. They're only thinking about
Oh, I got
that
150
proceeds.
cash
Yeah.
and not thinking 250 sale. Yes. So you do have to replace that $80,000 debt from the 250 sale with at least $80,000 into the new one. If, again, you want to take full advantage of the tax consequences and not do a partial exchange. To the extent that Brandon and I had that conversation before, most people trade up or trade out so that they are selling one property and then they're buying 3 different properties and kind of diversifying, going with Brandon and doing some of those DSTs that you talk about all the time. Buy one active investment, 2 passive investment, and then you're diversified a little bit more. Do you want to bring in debt? Absolutely. Because if you're not, then you're not taking full advantage of your deferral of gain.
I think this is more of where my clients get confused on this because they're not trading up. Our clients are trading out of the active real estate game. Mm-hmm. And so I think their thought process becomes, well, I have to invest this cash. And they're not thinking about the debt and the debt dynamics of that at all. Like they're not thinking about that equation. I think that's why I'm getting more of those questions where you're seeing.
We don't get those.
The average 1031 exchange isn't probably somebody doing DST. The average 1031 exchange is trade up, build wealth, keep deferring that tax. It's not somebody looking to exit. Because I would imagine in the minds of a lot of folks, when they're thinking about exiting, they're not really thinking about doing a 1031 exchange. They're thinking about, give me that cash, please.
Cash in hand, go on. Yeah, and you're the DST option with the passive investment, and you're still in the real estate market and taking advantage of the growth that we see in the United States makes nothing but sense. Let me ask you this, and this off the cuff, and you can get rid of this conversation from the end podcast if you want. If not, great. Can somebody, when they're going into a DST passive investment, have debt against their interest in the real property?
Yes. So the debt is embedded inside of the DSTs.
Okay.
The DSTs have debt attached to them for this exact purpose to suffice the exchange. And then when I explain that to people, they go, oh, okay, that makes sense now. And so when they have debt on the property that they're coming out of or trading out of to come into DST land, we have to take very close consideration to how much debt that I'm replacing and using that DST compared to what they're sacrificing. So it narrows their options a little bit, but there are tools and DSTs there that allow us to recreate almost any debt scenario that you need to. This is sort of an effective place to do it. I'll give you an example. I have someone on our desk right now who's looking at buying a vacation rental as part of their exchange, but has a lot of debt to recreate. They don't want to take debt out on that rental for natural reasons of the current state of the debt market. We have more effective debt solutions on the DST side. So we're going to use the DST and the debt to replace that portion of the exchange. And then you can buy the townhouse debt free on that side. And the difference there, I was looking at the options on the debt for the rental. That would suck up close to 80% of the cash flow. That would almost make that a cash flow negative investment for the investor. That is not an effective way to do that. So we're probably doubling at least the cash on cash immediately by going this route and taking a more effective debt option with the DST, as opposed to even buying that townhouse or that rental outright. This is a better option economically.
So let me ask you this. If I'm doing that, let's say I'm doing the exchange, okay, I'm going to put all my cash into the vacation because it's going to cash flow for me. And let's say the market changes as far as the cost of taking out a loan, and that drops down to 2% again. And I say, you know what, I'd rather jump into the loan on the vacation property now and get out of the debt in the DST. Is that an option, or is because the limitations on DSTs that you wouldn't be able to do that?
Can't do that. So I'll take it in 2 parts. You can't change the DST. DST is a closed-ended structure. They can't. The DST sponsor who runs that property and runs that DST, they can't refinance. Right. So there is no refinanceability there at all. However, absolutely no reason on the vacation rental that you can't go take advantage of 2% and lever that up.
Yeah.
That would
and buy something else or have some cash in your hand to be able to do that. Makes absolute sense.
Totally.
I just wanted to clarify. I mean, that's beyond the question of a 1031, because that's after you reinvested into it. But now I understand your thought process, because again, our role is pretty limited.
Yeah.
Because we do title settlement, we do the searching of the land records, we handle your funds safely and securely at the closing, and we hold them pursuant to IRS rules, if you're doing a 1031. We don't do the tax structure that you're talking about. That is something that you're working with the tax preparer, the accountant, the attorneys on behalf of the exchangers, to be able to do what's probably in their best interest.
And here we are again thinking about it. It does take a small little village here to kind of make this work in an efficient way for these options that folks aren't really thinking about, that are available. I've lost count on how many people have absolutely no idea what a DST even is, and that it is replacement property in a 1031 exchange. No clue, right? So they're missing that. And I would say more than half of the folks that come to our desk haven't consulted with their CPA about their tax bill. I would say at least that. Instead, they've maybe used the exchange calculator so they have a sense of what it is, but they haven't had their CPA give them a holistic view and tell them, if I don't exchange this property, what will be my tax bill this year?
Yeah.
Many haven't done that.
And I think where people get tripped up a lot, at least in my experience, is the depreciation and recapture. Because everybody's always thinking about capital gains. And the depreciation recapture, I don't know how long that's been around, to be honest. I'm at whatever age, it's been around as long as I can recall, but it's 25% and it's significant. Now, can these numbers change? Sure. Maybe this changed because of certain administrations, because as we all know, all of this depends on what the administration is in play in DC at the time. And there's been discussion, by the way, to get rid of 1031 exchanges, to force people when they sell real property in the United States to pay gain. It doesn't matter if you reinvest. Every single year that's on the docket in question in DC, that's our experience. My industry, the American Land Title Association, lobbies for the continuation of this because we'd like to see people reinvest. The Realtors Association does too, and I'm sure your association does as well. This is something we want to see continuing in the United States because we see growth because of it, because people can put real money back into it, improve property, and make it better communities.
Yeah, we get questions about that all the time too. Is 1031 exchange going away? I give the same historic spiel that you just provided as well. This has been around for 100 years. It gets challenged occasionally, and it's still around and it's still here. And to your point, I believe it was Deloitte who did a study on the tax impact of removing that. It actually has a negative tax impact if you remove 1031 exchange. Why? Because myself and Cheri on this call, we pay taxes and we're associated with this industry. We won't be doing that anymore. We'll be doing something else, hopefully, but we won't be paying taxes associated with providing services around 1031 exchange. And so that's the big thing. And people,
I
frankly,
think,
aren't going to
be
sell.
fair, if I was looking at, hey, I could pay $58,000 in taxes, should I do that? And I might consider not reinvesting. I may consider not selling. So I think this allows people to think about selling, especially as we all know that there is a structure where people say, you know, I'm just going to hold on to the property until I die. There's a step up in basis for my children or for my spouse. I'm just not going to sell that property now. But if you know that you can defer the gain today, then it encourages people to exit and reinvest into real property. So is it a tool? It's a great tool. And it makes sense. It helps our communities grow.
Yeah, it's huge.
Just know that the rules are strict. The IRS doesn't have a heart. If you goof up on the rule, you've blown your exchange. So that's what we focus on, is the 45 days, the 180 days, the documentation, and giving you a general idea of, here's something that you can save. Talk to your accountants, talk to Brandon, see where you can reinvest.
Yes, there is no, the IRS probably does have a heart. There's just, if you want to file an extension, you're going to want to do that on your taxes. There is no file extension option on your 1031 exchange. It doesn't exist.
Exactly.
It's just not there. What else do we miss that's really important?
I don't think we missed anything, Brandon. I think this is a Friday morning in summer. In the background there, I'm actually in downtown Milwaukee. Summerfest has started, so we can talk about the Zach Brown band that I'm going to tonight.
Oh, nice.
Chicken Pride.
Nice. And I have to give the shout outs for folks that are listening from non-Wisconsin. Summerfest is the largest music festival in the world in downtown Milwaukee, right on the lakefront. It's worth a trip. Every out of towner that I've talked to that has come here has thoroughly enjoyed their experience at Summerfest. So there's my Milwaukee Chamber of Commerce shout out for I've done my job today. So let the chamber know that I've done my promotion work for the city of
And
Mumbai.
it was free for them. That is phenomenal. I think you get a free Summerfest ticket. Just wanted
That'd
to
be
show
awesome.
everybody we have a nice FAQ on our website. So again, knightberry.com under our forms. We have a 1031 exchange FAQ. We kind of go over some of those rules we talked about. What is an exchange? Should you talk to your attorney or accountant? The 180 days, the 45 days. Talking about the 3 property rule that we talked about, identifying within 45 days, but then reference to that 200% and 95% rules, Brandon, that again, we really don't see utilized. And then if you have other questions to contact us as well, we also include our exchange fees right there. And we can do an exchange, whether we're the title and settlement company on the sale, the purchase, or not involved at all. So please feel free to use it. It's on our website. In other words, it's free as well. All this free stuff that we've just provided.
Yep, I'm gonna link. So I'm gonna put links to all that in the show notes, so folks have an easy way to access that.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, thanks so much for having me join you today.
Thank you, Cheri. I really appreciate it. We'll find a round 2 in here. I think a case study round 2 would be fun. Let's get some weird stuff so people can really get a sense and feel for it. I'll put that together. But for today, this has been great. Thank you so much. Thank everyone for listening. Until next time, see ya.